tackling fuel is a very important thing. If anybody doesn't want to be on the recording, please turn your camera off or amend your name so it doesn't include your surname. But we want to be able to share all the goodness that we've got lined up for you with people that can't make it today. So my name is Alex Hartley, and I've worked out while I went and made my cup of tea that I've been banging on about fuel poverty and energy efficiency for over 18 years now, near enough, give or take. And it's like the world has finally caught up with me, and it's now headline news for the first time in my life. So it's a very surreal place that I find myself in. We've got some great speakers for you today. Apart from me giving you a bit of a background session in a moment, we've got Alexa from Fuel Poverty Action. She's here already there. Thanks for the wave, Alexa. Lovely name, I'm biased. And Aryanisha from Repowering London, and she's going to be giving us a good flavour of what they've been up to. So first things first, Catherine, can you launch the first poll, please? So for those of you that aren't so familiar with Community Energy London, we're a membership organisation of 30 like-minded community energy groups across London. We set up several years ago, and we've been gradually getting up ahead of steam ever since. It's free to join if you're not currently a member, and we'll be delighted to have you because we think that our sector and movement is only going to get stronger and stronger as we go. The latest State of the Sector report from the Community Energy England is due out in June, and I'm pretty sure this will back up my assertion here. So the first poll is, we'd just like to know if you've got any experience in running an energy advice service or a fuel poverty related project. And also, for our nosiness, we'd like to know how you heard about the session, because this is the first one in a series of 6. And we'd like to know what's working to get to under the noses of, of you people that we want to be talking to. Don't worry, Catherine, you've been energy efficient by putting more than one question in instead of just the first one there. So you can't answer question 3 yet because we haven't got to the end of the session, but hopefully we will make sure it's at least semi-useful for you. So we've only got an hour, so onwards we go. Catherine, could you share the slides? These are more to keep me on track, not to give everybody a bit of, death by PowerPoint. But while Catherine does that, if everybody could put in the chat who they are and where they're from, that would be absolutely amazing, because we'd like to know who we're talking to. Yeah, that's very energy efficient, isn't it? Give us your feedback now about the session. We haven't done the session yet.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now, so I'll give you 2 more seconds.
Of course. Okay.
And
can you put it on presenter mode, please?
Yes. Okay. End poll. I can hide down there, and then
we were a bit flummoxed because when we were testing this out beforehand, oh crumbs, we tried to take the somehow they got animation put on them, and we've tried to remove it, but there's some of them that we just couldn't get it to be removed, so apologies for any annoying animation coming up. So we've got the topic today, the challenge and action we can take around fuel poverty, and this is assuming that most of you are pretty unfamiliar with this. It's a term that gets bandied around a lot, but let's have a quick look at what it means. But first of all, on to the next slide. So today we're going to have a look at what the definition is, what causes it, a bit about the London context. Then we're going to hear from our amazing speakers from Fuel Poverty Action and Repowering London. And then we've also got some more exciting things lined up for you, not just the next 5 sessions that we're going to be doing over the next 6 months around this topic, but also a special offering for Community Energy Fortnight, which is going to be a really good deep dive on what you need to think about before you get going on these projects in a very practical way with my old comrade in arms, Dr. Giovanna Speciale. So next slide, please. So today we're going to hear from Alexa, Aryanisha, and you're already hearing from myself, who works part-time for the Community Energy London Fuel Poverty. Next one. So as I said at the top of this, you'd have to be living under a rock at the moment not to be aware of the absolute debacle that is the current state of the energy costs for people living in the UK. Right up to the minute, everything in this space is continually changing. There's just some headlines from yesterday. We've got basically a situation which I couldn't have ever imagined when I'd started working in this sector a very long time ago, where we've got an absolute exponential rise. And this week we've seen the October price cap coming in, which had previously been projected to be 25% increase, to a staggering 42% on top of the already 54% that we saw in April. And this is horrific, pretty much. It's not a case of the old heating or eating for many people out there. If you go to any of the fuel poverty advice or energy efficiency projects that are going on around London at the moment and talk to people out there getting the benefit of the advice they can get from people, they are essentially not even being able to choose between heating and eating at the moment. And it might be lovely weather out there, but fuel poverty is a year-round issue. You get mums saying, my kid asked me if it's toast or cereal day. People are not washing or putting on the lights in the evening because they're terrified about the energy prices. It's not a problem that's going away. We've known about this issue for, well, we started talking about fuel poverty in the 1970s. Dr. Brenda Boardman brought her book out in, I think it was 91. And ever since, we've talked about the state of our housing stock, and yet still there's so much that needs to be sorted out. However, we can have an opportunity here to talk about energy efficiency while we're getting all these headlines. Next slide. So there's the official definition. According to the government, if you live in C or above, regardless of your income, you can't possibly be fuel poor. I'm not going to say any more than that because I'm not going to allow myself to get political, but it is a political issue for me. The latest official stat is it's around 13% of households in the UK that are struggling to pay for their basic energy and heat needs. However, projections, next slide please, from the NEA are looking at absolutely, well, it could be up to 50% of the country that would meet this definition if the package that came in yesterday that's been offered or proposed doesn't kick in. But the thing is, with what was announced yesterday, when you look at it, it sounds pretty good, but it still won't help the most vulnerable, and it still doesn't touch the sides of the price increases either. Next slide, please. When we talk about tackling fuel poverty, I hate the word vulnerable, but that's the one that Ofgem uses because it's so disempowering and quite Victorian. However, it's the official recognised category, and as you can see, fuel poverty is just one type of category that can make somebody be officially in fuel poverty or vulnerable. Fuel poverty is just one of the types of vulnerabilities. Next slide. Now, it's not just a stress or money issue. It has huge impacts on physical or mental health, for increased trips and falls. If you don't have your main living area at 18 to 21 in the winter, you could be risking your respiratory and cardiovascular issues. Your blood pressure goes up if your home is too cold. And there's so many other impacts, from children's doing less well at school to the economic impacts. So it's not just a comfort thing, tackling fuel poverty. Next slide. There's also the huge cost to the NHS, which they're looking at about 1.36 billion, which is not to be sneezed at. In fact, I saw an analysis, next slide, of what the current package for the this cold season coming up would cost us, and if actually it was diverted to help the most vulnerable increase their homes, if thermal efficiency, it would actually yield a lot more, but you know, that would be too sensible. So we are looking at a impending crisis on top of the one we're already in, but the good news is we can do so much to help, whether it's reassuring people about what the price cap is, that half the time I'm spent telling people they can put their electricity on or their heating if it's cold. Then the other time I'm trying to get them to turn it off to save money and cut carbon. So it's a very strange world I live in. Next slide, please. We talk about community energy coming from the grassroots, but it's got to be both a top down and bottom up. Every year there's an annual debate in the House of Commons, and we see so much hot air and not much action. They continually fail to meet their own meager targets for tackling the problem. They do recognise it's a huge issue, and the Environmental Committee actually says energy efficiency is the best long-term solution. It's also helping people get access to trusted, impartial advice, and that's why projects like many of our members run are absolutely invaluable, because we are the interface between what's available to help others. Next slide.
1 minute, Alex.
Thank you, Lorraine. So this was based on last year's State of the Sector from Community Energy England. We've got basically about over 420, I think it's about getting on a lot more members by now. I think it's about 450. We can be that intermediary that can translate and engage people, because we do things in a trusted but impartial way, and they might not trust their energy provider, they might not trust their local council even, but once they realise people connected to this work, their only agenda is to help them save energy and money, and we're not going to rip them off or try and sell them at something. That's when we get uptake, not just around better situation for bills, but also for engaging with things like the GLA's Warmer Homes grant and a whole raft of other things. Next slide. This is the last slide from me before we hand over to our lovely presenters. This is how groups and projects can help. We can do things that other people can't. We can mobilise very quickly. For example, South East London Community Energy, who I'm a co-founder voluntary director for still, we pivoted very quickly under COVID to be able to offer a online telephone based and dropping off measures to help people around energy efficiency very quickly. If it'd been in a larger organization or more corporate, it was a lot longer to mobilize what people wanted and needed and under the circumstances. We also are very human based in how we operate. So if we see there's a need, we can utilize that, and we can also utilize volunteers as well as make sure that we've got money coming in to make sure we can keep doing the good work. So we are uniquely placed to partner with all sorts of different people, and we have this specialist interest because we're all sustainable energy geeks, but we try and make it as relevant and useful and interesting for people as possible. But we need more people to join our cause, to whether you're from a council or a community group or a faith group. You don't have the experience in doing it maybe, but we have lots of lessons we'd love to share with you, because we need an army of people doing this across London because people are suffering unnecessarily. If you could finish the slideshow, please, Catherine. Okay, so to set the scene a bit clearer and tell us all about what they're up to campaigning, I'd like to hand over to Alexa and from Fuel Poverty Action. And just to let you know, Alexa, Lorraine is being our excellent timekeeper today, so if she gives you a 1 minute warning, it's not personal.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Alex, and for the slides. I don't actually have slides for today, so hopefully I can tell the story in an engaging enough way that all of you stay interested. My name's Alexa, and I've been an organizer, a campaigner with Fuel Poverty Action now for the last 4 years. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking today. Well, I was asked to talk about the scale of the problem, which I think Alex already has outlined really clearly. And I think we all, given where we are positioned, know what's going on and how serious and I guess absolutely unacceptable it is. But also tell a little bit about the story of Fuel Poverty Action and what we've been doing in the midst of this crisis and the lead up to it. I think FPA has been around for 11 years now. So a long time working at the intersection of anti-poverty and climate justice. It was born in sort of just after 2010 from both the climate justice or the climate movement where it was at the time. So think climate camps. I wasn't around in the UK at this point, I'm Canadian, but also anti-austerity, the beginnings of the anti-austerity movement. And it was founded by a group of people who really wanted to take seriously the climate crisis and that things needed to change about our energy system, about the way we were treating the planet, about our relationship to the environment and each other, but also that addressed social justice issues that had an immediate effect on people's lives. At the time, especially, and still you hear this going around, it's like, oh, it's a trade-off between choosing the environment or things that are good for people. And of course, Fuel Poverty Action set out from the beginning to dispel that myth that it's actually not that, if you look at it closely, that the sort of wins that we want for the planet are also what need to happen for people. And so when this was going to be, when the fuel crisis was sort of starting up, and we realized we were going to be encountering some really major price rises. Fuel Poverty Action had a lot of existing relationships and campaigns to draw on and bring into this. For the last 3 years, we've been talking about this idea, which we used to call a warm floor, and now we're calling energy for all. That instead of tinkering around the edges of how broken our pricing system for energy here in the UK is, we were going to be proposing something completely different. So right now, I'm sure you're all familiar that if you are using a lot less energy, tiny bits of energy, maybe nothing at all, you're paying way more per unit than someone who uses a lot. And that's because of the way that the standing charge works. It's because of the way, the standing charge works, and then you start getting the per kilowatt hour cost, and because of who's on prepayment meters, which also have a standing charge and a higher rate. And so the people who are using the least are paying the most. That's completely upside down. And not only that, those who are least able to pay are the ones who are being charged the highest rates. So instead of saying, oh, well, what if we tinker with this or change this rate, or what if we directed a little bit more funding here? We say, absolutely no. We need to be thinking completely outside of the box. Energy is something that people should have. You should have a right to be able to be in a warm, safe home, to turn on the lights. What if we put forward a proposition that actually got to the root of the problem and turned the pricing structure right side up? What if everyone had a free band of energy that enabled them to live? And then we've been talking about this for a long time. We went to the tenants and residents associations that we've been in touch with following the flammable cladding Grenfell disaster. We went to DPAC, our friends at Disabled People Against Cuts, to hear what they would have to say at this idea. We went to various pensioners groups that we've been working with for a long time, and some environmental groups, and we sort of have been socializing this idea back since 2019. And we had some strong messages back. People really wanted to be universal, but they also were like, well, I live in a really old, leaky home. What's going to happen about that? Or I'm disabled, I require more energy than someone else. How do I fit into the free band? And so we started to think of some principles that this does need to depend on also making sure people's houses are insulated and making sure that it's tailored to meet the needs of different people, but that everyone should have a right to a free band of energy. But we didn't think it was like, thought it was a bit of a wild idea. Most of the public aren't going to like this. They kind of, it's fine right now. So back when we were first talking about it, we were just sort of filling it up. But then when this moment hit, when the energy's been broken, system's been broken for years, there's been way too many people living in fuel poverty for years. But when it got to this next level of complete desperation, we were like, this is the time. We need to be telling people and putting this as a solution on the table when so much right now is focused on sort of making things work. And the night we put this petition that, thank you for sharing, into the chat, it got 120,000 signatures overnight. So clearly this was a idea that's resonating with people. We're nearly up at 500,000 signatures. And so what we're trying to do right now is take the steps along the way that are going to get us to a complete change of the energy system, as opposed to taking for granted that right now fossil fuel companies are making billions and billions more. And all of the rebates that are going to us right now that are helping to cover people's bills are going either from our pockets into the pockets of fossil fuel giants, or now from the government back to those same companies to only make the climate crisis work and to continue to make us reliant on oil and gas and volatile prices that don't put people first. And so we are fighting for also, I'll put another link in the chat, a challenge or end to standing charge and prepayment meter injustice. And so we've been launching a campaign against Ofgem for this. I'll put that in the chat. We were part of the windfall tax coalition trying to get that to happen. So we now have seen that, but we want the money to be going to things in a slightly different way. But we also, this is an invitation to sort of join us in this new venture to figure out the steps along the way, the sustainable energy steps, the retrofit steps that actually get us into a world where it's more possible to turn the upside down pricing structure right side up and get energy for all. And there's a lot of wins that we can get on the way there that have immediate impacts on people's lives. So I guess I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Alexa, for that really inspiring and a great overview of fuel poverty action and its work. Yes, I remember Climate Camp very well, but as it was literally 5 minutes from where I live, I decided to go to the Welsh one because it didn't seem too easy to go that one. But I remember my colleague G met Ruth there, where they set up Fuel Poverty Action from. So great, that was a very good different perspective on the issues that we're talking about tackling. And now we want to hear from one of our members who have developed a variety of ways to increase energy democracy and sustainable energy in our local communities. So over to Aryanisha if you are ready to go.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Good. So I'm actually calling you from a campsite in Horsley. So me and my partner have a camper van. So debatable, but it seems to be running fine today. Good. Well, very lovely to meet everyone here, and just great to see colleagues in the sector that you know, I've seen your names and your organisations around. Besides also the chair of our board of directors, so hello to you. I've also got Aryanisha here from Repowering London as well. She's one of our community champions. So we run a whole bunch of different projects to support a just transition to net zero. That includes creating cooperatives to get renewable energy, mainly solar power, on top of community building, social housing estates, that sort of thing. And we raise money through community share offers to do that. And so that's a whole part of the team on our kind of our rooftop solar team. So that's kind of like busy with that. We also are running a few innovation projects that are looking at what local supply models would look like. So once you've got that renewable energy, the solar on top of a social housing estate, what would need to change in terms of the tech, how we work with people and policy so that they could actually directly benefit from it. So there's been a number of projects we're doing with those. We're also looking at a retrofit offer, and a whole bunch of other projects I think that I'm not even particularly clued up on as well. That you probably, I was going to say, you could probably find a bit more on our website. We're getting better at saying what we're doing on our website. But like a lot of organisations, quite often we're kind of busy getting on with things practically, and less good at putting case studies up. So we've got very good comms officer who's chivvying us along to do that. So then the work that I've been involved in, what's now called the Community Support Services team, that's really looking at how we support people who are in need, like right now, who really are struggling right now, and have been in the past. And I'm pleased, Alex, that you said, we've got a crisis on top of a crisis that's probably on top of other crises as well. COVID was a particularly challenging time for us and for our communities. So I'd say, sort of looking back, I think there's kind of like roughly 4 stages to the evolution of the work that we do to support people very directly when they've been struggling with their energy bills. So to begin with, we started off just door knocking the estates where we were getting solar energy on top of flats, social housing estates in Brixton, and providing some degree of support to them. And then we start to expand that more broadly to Brixton and Lambeth, with a kind of more general advice service, doing things like back in the good old days when we were doing just like tariff checks and applying for grants to help people with some of their energy debt, dealing with a few complaints with the suppliers, that sort of thing. So quite and also doing soft measures, so LED light bulbs, radiator panels, that sort of thing. And then when COVID hit, we decided that we'd really focus on people who are really at the sharp end of fuel poverty crisis. So people who couldn't get out and top up their prepayment meters, maybe those who are on 0 hours contracts who are completely running out of money. And we were able to redistribute some of the funds that we'd had from a project with the energy redress to get some fuel vouchers, and then we got hooked up with the Fuel Bank Foundation and were funded to give out fuel vouchers through them. So once we'd made contact with a household who was really struggling, topped up their meters, which sometimes involved actually going and doing it for them. And that was a whole faff in itself, because there's lots of issues with fuel vouchers and local shops not accepting them. So yeah, that was the whole thing. We would then start working with them to understand what was really going on. And I think what's really important to emphasize is that, and Fran LaBelle, who also does some work with Fuel Poverty Action, who's our main energy advisor during that whole kind of crisis period, she's always talking about how fuel poverty is a poverty issue. So often people don't have enough income. A lot of people we're working with were struggling to access the benefits that they were entitled to, because it's just such a horrendous situation with the DWP, quite frankly. People who are not able to get universal credit, not able to get disability related benefits, that sort of thing. So quite often we'd need to be signposting people in for very specialist and ongoing benefits support. And then we kind of went through sort of a whole review of that. We were working with people who are in quite extreme circumstances, spiraling, that slide that Alex put up around all the kind of other things that are interacting with fuel poverty, like people's mental health. We were dealing with I'd say a very high proportion of our clients had very complex needs, and it was involving a lot of a lot of very in-depth support, and we just had to have a think about the direction that we wanted to go in as a service, and whether or not we really had the kind of capacity to be providing the support that people needed at that kind of scale, because at that point anyone could call us up and become a client of ours. So what we've actually decided to do is focus in on providing kind of wraparound support and advice to people who are still in need, but who are participating in more kind of discrete projects that we're running in the community. So Aryanisha, for example, she's our community champion for a project on Repowering Park Estate that's funded by Guy's and St Thomas Trust, a local health trust. And yeah, that's a whole project for 20 households on improving indoor air quality and energy efficiency. And as part of that whole kind of project, we're providing this one-to-one support as well. So we're picking up where people need signposting, picking up where people need help checking their tariff, or picking up any complaints with their suppliers, that sort of thing. So we're taking kind of all the learning from these kind of different phases of our support service and just kind of like honing in like what our model is. And there's lots I could say that we've learned during that period. I'm sure Aryanisha and Franisha would here could say quite a bit as well. Definitely what we've learned is it's just really important to kind of really like know your audience, and particularly understand like what their kind of like primary needs are. I've also got a background working in social housing. I burnt out as a housing officer, so I come in very cautious. Also going through the kind of COVID crisis, I think it just makes you realise, yeah, you need to think carefully about the intended target audience and what their needs are, and be very, very realistic about what you can provide. And I think when there is a crisis like this, I see a lot of people very, very understandably wanting to help, and there's lots of ways that we can do that. But if you're thinking of running a project, setting up a service, or you know people who are, really, really, really think carefully about yeah, whether or not you're going to be able to provide the level of support that's needed. If you've got the right training around like mental health awareness and safeguarding, for example, have you got the right team structure? You know, is there always going to be someone on hand if a colleague is dealing with a really difficult call? And I just really advise people to just start small, co-design what you're thinking of doing with the target group, and really, really learn from them. Let them lead on what they think is going to be helpful, what they kind of really need, how they want the service to get delivered. Have plenty of time for learning, running focus groups, getting feedback, and then change your approach if you need to. And I wouldn't judge the success of a project by its longevity. If you realise that actually this isn't quite right for us in this group, think about doing something differently and go in that direction.
Thank you so much for that. Really inspiring. And I was you made me remember the early days of Chelsea and how we got going. We were just a group of local residents who wanted to do something about climate change and fuel poverty. Fast forward to 8 years later, we've got, I think we've got about a team of 10 full-time staff now, just covering our little corner of southeast London. So from little acorns, all sorts can grow. For example, making me thinking about, if Pamela, if you don't mind me name checking you, I'm giving some support for Pamela and her group and a local organisation to look at starting a energy champions training, which I've been doing a lot of this week, which is one of my favourite things to do, just to help run pop-up energy advice cafes, just to get started, right through to oh, hello Mick, I've just seen you pop up from the London Federation of Housing Co-ops. Nice to see you. We've got all sorts of different actors in the space, and we can't do what we do without working in partnership. So it's absolutely vital. So I just wanted to open up the floor now if any, what questions came up for everybody else as we heard from our speakers, including myself? Would anyone like to highlight a question they've popped in the chat that maybe Lorraine, you can highlight for us, or just pop your mic off and pop your mute off and ask any of our panelists anything that you might find useful to pick their brains on? So we've got Vanessa and Linda. Oh no, I think Vanessa, that's you, Mick, masquerading as Vanessa. So I saw Vanessa's hand. Mick's hands are first. Would you like to ask your question, Mick?
Oh yeah, sorry, I just had to get the unmute off. Thanks for the introduction, Alex. My question is basically this. I came across independently the need to sort of do away with the standing charge and have a lower charge for the initial electricity used years ago. And I broached it in front of a relatively senior politician, Meg Hillier, at a conference. And what I found was that I couldn't get the concept across to her. They could not grasp the concept of charging people less for the first few kilowatts of electricity and more for the other stuff they're using. And I just wondered whether Alex has any suggestions about how we do that, how we convince them that this is the way to go. I mean, it makes perfectly sense to me. If you want to conserve power and also cut down on fossil fuels, you introduce a higher charge for extra consumption. But how do you graft that across to the politicians, especially now that we have the means to do this through the smart meters? Nobody realized the smart meters are the perfect tool for doing this.
Thank you, Mick. I think, yeah, that's more of a question from the sort of top-down approach, and that's where the campaigns that Alexa and Fuel Poverty Action are looking at. What we're looking at are, more from the grassroots and community responses. Is there anything you'd like to add to Mick's question, comment, Alexa?
Yeah, so that's an interesting point that how long ago was this, Mick, that you were doing this? I feel like
4 or 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago. It is hard to get these points across sometimes because they get talked about in a technical way. I feel like in the midst of our current moment, some of these things that didn't make sense to people even a year ago suddenly do. So Ruth and I have been doing quite a bit of broadcast media about this because we've been trying to get people to realize the situation in a slightly different way and bring up these issues and sort of seriousness of it. And the standing charge is starting to make common sense to people because they're, especially in the context of a prepayment meter. So the idea that you put money in your prepayment meter and you could have everything off and it's still just ticking away because of the standing charge, and then suddenly you're left without any electricity, and that's a very, the standing charge, if you talk about it in that way, I think really comes across. And the fact that if you lead just by saying this is upside down, people who are using way less are paying more per unit cost, and then people who are using loads are paying less per unit. But I think the standing charge and just this idea that you put money on it and it's ticking away and eating at the standing charge is eating at people's credit is has been helpful. But in the context of this crisis, even on the sorts of people on sort of more right-wing media that we've been going on because it reaches so many people, they're like, oh, that seems awful. Why is that the case? It's sort of common sense. That doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what it'd be like to talk to a politician in this context. But
thank you for that, Alexa. Just to, I hope that answered your thoughts there, Mick. Yeah, I'm just going to go to the chat.
I think Linda had a question.
Yes. Chat. Oh yes, I've actually done some energy advice cafes in Lewisham homes in the reception a couple of years ago. We did them for a few years, so we'll have to tell you what's happened there. But over to Linda. Thank you, Linda. Where are you calling from?
Oh, hi, morning, Alex, and everybody. Thanks very much. I'm actually kind of sneaking in from way across the other side. I'm actually based in Somerset, and we work in North Somerset and Somerset. So apologies. And now I'm cheeky enough to ask a question as well. So I feel like I'm kind of hijacking the air a minute. And also just forgive me, because my question's in my head, it might not come out fully formed. So I'll try and kind of make it a little bit more obvious. But we are looking at developing fuel poverty advice in its kind of its bluntest term, I guess, but that's not quite what we're trying to do. But and being very mindful of what's being shared in this session about how we should best position ourselves, given that we don't have extensive experience of mental health support and kind of the wider support that people might need. So we're being very, very cautious to kind of quote, I might get your name wrong, Aryanisha, sorry. Aryanisha's advice about taking things slowly and working out how best we should position ourselves. So we're having lots of conversations with other energy advisors, other energy support, other poverty support as well, that's available to us, to our householders locally. Interestingly, some of the kind of feedback we're getting is around what are we doing, or what do we want to do that is so different to what's out there already. So this is kind of where my question comes from, I think, and I'd be really interested to know, based on your experience, about what it is that is needed that isn't already provided.
Interesting. Thank you, Linda. Alexa, Aryanisha, if you had a magic wand, which is slightly realistic, what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of things that are online and phone based at the moment, and what we're really seeing, say in Brixton, is the need for in-person kind of ongoing contact. And this is why it's good to start small, is just to get a sense actually of like how long does it take to do that kind of work. So like I saw a lady yesterday who not yesterday, this week, who she's got breathing difficulty, so it's hard for her to be on the phone a lot, and also she's got physical disability, so she can't leave her house, so she needs people to go round, and she needs people that she feels safe with, and that they are community groups. If you're not, you could always look to partner up with another organisation and go in with like an existing support worker. I mean, that might be a way of trying something out first, actually. We're working with an estate that we know has, we've already got a good relationship with. I know the housing officers, so if I needed to talk to them, I could. So yeah, I would that kind of in-person trustworthy support, I think is really needed for people. Also, just because sometimes you just need to get like photos of bills and have a chat with them, and that I think is part of it, is that kind of person to person approach. You can't get on the phone and you can't get on the internet. Also, just like quite a few people like are digitally excluded. There's loads of information on the internet people just can't navigate, and also when they're overwhelmed, it's just hard to make a decision about what you should focus on first. So I think that can help, is just kind of chunking it down into like an action plan with people. But yeah, I would say that work is much more intensive, because if also you're doing home visits, you just need to factor in time to have a cup of tea with someone, and they're going to have a chat about, their family or whatever as well. So it takes time to build up that trust, but I think it's some of the most worthwhile work that you can do. It just takes quite a lot of resources, which can be harder to kind of sell to funders, because sometimes funders can be about big numbers.
Thank you. Alexa, a magic wand, what would you like to see to help a community response to improve the lot of fuel poverty stricken households?
Yeah, well, I think building on that answer, because I would say probably similar things, plus you're more familiar with that area of energy advice. One of the things that would be helpful from our perspective with the magic wand is that built into this sort of advice giving, there's sort of building power too, so that people can say, okay, this is what I'm doing within the current situation. Like, I'm actually not going to get forced into prepayment meter because I know that now I know my rights and I know that I'm on the vulnerable list from Ofgem, so they can't actually force me to do it. But I also just think that's sort of ridiculous. And I have agency and power as a person with my neighbors, with my family, and with the people I know. So how are we building these sorts of things and sort of changing the rules of the game as well? So it just doesn't become sort of a advice giving thing, but it's like, okay, we also want to change the rules. And the way we're going to get that is for fighting for ourselves together. So I don't know if there's a way to link up, like the new bit would be the energy giving, but also like having people realize the strength that they can be when they act together with other people.
One could even say empowering them.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, but I feel like sometimes that word gets overused.
I know, and I love puns, so I apologize to everybody for that. No, what I would you know, add to what our two external speakers would say, and yes, there is whether you're doing a light touch energy advice, quick wins, just, you know, from a sort of, you know, half an hour chat, a pop-up advice desk, right through to long-term casework intervention, helping people navigate through the complicated maze of all the various grants and what have you there is going on out there at the moment, right across the board to being very embedded with public health and sustainability teams in the local council. I remember we first rocked up at, we've got a couple of people from Lewisham here, so I'll name and shame Lewisham with love and affection, that they've, and you know, other councils similar, they're like, well, who are you? Why are you trying to do this in our patch? And you know, this is sort of our area, isn't it? Fast forward to now they commission us to do different things with my Celsi hat on. So yeah, it's possible to develop this in a way that can be really meaningful and have a huge impact. And for some people, the key thing is that keeping people at the heart of everything and doing with them, not to them, and that empowers them. And then they can feel less scared of looking at their bill online or talking to their energy company and saying, no, I don't want that prepayment meter actually. Thank you very much. I'll stick with the cheapest way of paying for my electricity on a monthly direct debit rather than having to cost me more when you're saying that I have to have one. So just sort of empowering people in that way. And the last, I think we've kind of not got much more time because we are being super quick in the lunchtime session, but we do, this is just the first of 6, and we also have some coming up for or Pamela, prepayment meters. That could be a whole hour, frankly.
There's a question as well on where was it? From your experience, is Energy Cafe a term that resonates with diverse potential users, or might there be a more widely appealing one? Are they ever combined with, for example, a repair cafe?
Yeah, yes. I know, for example, Transition Town Ilford are about to start doing that with some, yeah, Energy Advice Cafe is more descriptive. We do just shorten it to Energy Cafe if you're doing it, but the key thing is it's not just like a pop-up advice desk. It's done in a stigma-free way that we're all worried about paying too much for our energy. Having a cup of tea and a bit of cake or a banana, sat down having a chat with somebody that's not trying to sell you something, so then you might then feel comfortable about divulging that you've got lots of energy debt and you can actually get some practical help to deal with it. You know, that's why the cafe is, to make it feel less kind of statutory, if that helps. But yeah, that's an interesting one. We're always looking at different ways to make this meaningful for people, how home visits are done, for example, or how you know, materials are created and whether they speak to people and resonate with them or not. Okay, let me just go back to my Oh, we've got lots of lovely comments. Fantastic. Just making sure haven't missed anyone.
All good.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Makes nice change. So I'll talk to you separately about prepayment meters, Pamela. This has obviously captured your attention. So what we'd like to have a look at now. Hang on, I've just lost my ready reckoner. Oh, crumbs. I accidentally closed it and now I've lost it. Can you ping it to me again, Lorraine, please? Sorry. Okay. Just wanted to have a quick look at, have we got another, we're doing the poll at the end.
Yeah. And we've got events next, I think.
Yeah, so if you could just pop up my last few slides to keep me on track, because I love to go off on a tangent.
Sorry, who's doing slides?
Are you for my last few slides?
Sure, give me a second.
So this is just the start of the conversation for increasing energy and advice and fuel poverty tackling projects across London. We have a good stable of those happening already in various different ways at various different levels. However, we want to see more. So anybody that would like some extra support or to discuss things, we've got funding to help people go on this journey for themselves. And I've, you know, if I don't know the answer, luckily I know lots and lots of people that normally do know the answer. And so we can share that with you, and we can maybe create some of the opportunities for some of the next 5 sessions to actually be tailored to what people want and need around this. So if you haven't yet, if someone could put the survey link to our survey from Community Energy London, to pop that in the question, because we're using in the chat, because we're using the answers from that to help shape our next sessions. The next slide on from that, please, Catherine. So we just wanted to leave with you a couple of things for food for thought. No pun intended again, Alex, really with the puns. Just what we can do now, 5 takeaways that all of us, whether it's to our neighbour, to our friend, family, someone in an evening class, standing at the bus stop. I once helped actually switch an Uber driver, but that's a whole other story, during the drive. So what we can do now, we can't help people switch really at the moment. The standard variable tariff is paid by monthly direct debit is the best way to not be paying over the odds and asking the energy company you're with to make sure you're on the cheapest tariff. To raise awareness about the warm home discount, which is going up to £150 this October, which is core group of people is the pension credit guaranteed element. There's broader groups which are roughly, they differ slightly with whatever energy company you're with, but essentially if you've got a long-term health condition or a disability, or you fit into one of those vulnerable groups we saw earlier and you're on a lower income, it's worth inquiring. That was some of the energy companies start opening them in August, and they're open right through to March, but some of them only have them open for a week, Utilita, because they have a very small amount of availability for it, but not every, but you've got to have over 100,000 customers to offer that. Some actually offer it voluntarily. Watersure and Water Help, if you've got a long-term health condition or disability and you're on a low income, this is 50% off your annual water bill. Someone might not know about these things. There's also the Priority Service Register. Big shout out, there we are. We've got a UKPN representing in the house here today. This is a raft of things that basically mean your energy company and the network provider, if there's an emergency, they'll make sure people are looked after that need it, whether it's from ensuring they've got a power supply for their equipment, or if they need to go in a hotel or whatever it is, right through to large print bills or password schemes or moving meters that are in difficult places. It basically means they have to all be nicer and more thoughtful towards you. Sign people up, it's free, it's there to be used. Also talking to people about using less energy. So many people don't realize still they're wasting energy unnecessarily by not washing at 30, leaving stuff on standby. Switching over to LEDs is a huge big saving that can be done easily. Loads of things around the house that people can do, but also increasing your own knowledge of what's available in your local area. If you've got a particularly great local mind, have you got a gardening group? Is there things around, lots of climate action cafes are setting up to sort of look at reducing your whole carbon footprint as an individual, as a household, and doing things at a community level has the most impact when you analyze looking at what we do individually right through expanded out to looking at as a community and as a country. So next slide, please. So we've got, this is going to happen on the last Friday of every month for the next 6 months, that we're going to have a 1-hour workshop lunchtime. We've got 2 minutes, racing through the last slide, hold on to your hats. So Dr. Giovanna Speciale and myself developed this program of 2 very practical, everything you need to think of before you start doing any sort of energy advice or fuel poverty tackling project. They're focused on everything from how to work out what sort of intervention is right for your group and your local area, or the people that you're looking at trying to work with. They're not energy advice training or community champion training. This is everything that you need to think about around it, whether it was health and safety or safeguarding, or how to find where the pockets of fuel poverty are, using all the different available info sources to us, including the GLA Great Map or just lower super output area data. So these will be available to sign up on Eventbrite, and I would just like to thank you for attending our first of 6 sessions, and I hope nobody's got indigestion at the speed that we've gone through a lot of this stuff. But if you haven't already signed up for Community Energy London newsletter, I am biased because I'm working part-time for Community Energy London, but it's always info packed and really useful. And we have a monthly meeting every Thursday evening. Is it the last Thursday of every month? Yes, it is. Yeah. And then the last but not least, the final poll, the energy efficient last question. Now you can tell us whether you found this session interesting, useful, or diabolical, food for thought, or hopefully the start of something a lot more interesting and useful happening in your local area. So just wait for Catherine to launch that in the last 30 seconds.
Sorry, it's vanished. Give me a second.
Okay, I'll tap dance, they won't notice.
There we go.
Right, there we go. Was this session useful? Not a great use of your lunchtime. You wish you'd been sat outside and looking at the blue sky I can see out my window instead. If not, tell us what could be done different. Email us. Catherine, I'll give out your email address so they can.
I've put it in the chat.
Not me. She's popped it in the chat. What would you like to see in future? What would you find useful? Just tell us. We're open, we're here, we want to see more of these projects happening. Tell us what we can do to support you doing that. Thank you very much for your time and attention, everybody. Hope to see you on a future event, and very much enjoy the rest of your Friday and weekend.
The Eventbrite link is also in the chat for you to sign up to all of our future events.
Yes. Thank you, Catherine. Teamwork make the dream work again, once again.
Indeed. Thank you, everyone.